The air was thick with tension in the courtroom of Houston, Texas, as the judge's gavel hovered in suspense over a case that had captured the attention of the city. Daniel Harris, a man whose life had spiraled into the dark corridors of crime, sat rigidly in the defendant's box, his eyes flickering between the faces of those he had wronged and the unknown outcome that would decide his future. Behind him, the murmurs of the audience blended with the solemn weight of history. This wasn't just a case, it was a story that challenged the very boundaries of justice and mercy. Could a man condemned by law find redemption in the eyes of society? Or would the scales of justice tip inexorably toward punishment, leaving no room for hope? Disclaimer. Content is for awareness and educational purposes only. Viewer discretion advised. Houston, 2019. Daniel Harris, once a promising young man with a bright future, had made choices that led him deep into a web of crime. His story began with minor thefts that escalated into violent confrontations, eventually landing him behind bars for a series of serious offenses. But this episode isn't just about the crime, it's about the human spirit caught between the rigid hands of justice and the unexpected power of mercy. The stakes were immense. Years of incarceration, a fractured family, and the looming possibility that Daniel's life would be defined solely by his worst mistakes. From the outside, Daniel appeared just another prisoner, tattoos lining his arms, hardened eyes scanning the room. But those who knew him well could see the flicker of a man searching for meaning amid chaos. Inside, the prison walls whispered stories of betrayal, desperation, and violence. Every corner held a memory of choices that brought him here, each echo amplifying the question that haunted him. Could a man truly change when society had already labeled him irredeemable? As he recounted the nights spent in solitary confinement, Daniel's voice trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of reflection. The man who once thrived on manipulation and intimidation now faced a new reality. Survival was no longer about physical strength, but the courage to confront his own conscience. Fellow inmates, hardened by years of crime, watched him closely, sensing the transformation unfolding. Could one man's search for redemption survive the unforgiving walls of a system designed to punish rather than heal? And yet, in the midst of despair, a glimmer of unexpected hope emerged. A prison chaplain, Reverend Samuel, recognized something in Daniel that no one else seemed willing to see. Potential. A potential that, if nurtured, could turn a story of crime and regret into one of mercy and reconciliation. The question now hung like a storm cloud over the entire system. Would justice demand retribution, or could mercy intervene to create a path toward redemption? The first whispers of change came slowly. A single conversation, a shared moment of vulnerability, a subtle shift in attitude that began to ripple through the prison yard. Fellow inmates noticed it, guards noticed it. Even the court would later acknowledge it. But would it be enough to alter the path that Daniel's life seemed destined to follow? As the tension built, the first signs of a moral confrontation began to take shape. A clash, not of fists, but of principles. Justice demanded accountability. Mercy demanded transformation. And Daniel Harris, once defined by his crimes, now stood at the precipice of a life-altering choice. Could one man's journey change the course of countless lives? Or would the unforgiving machinery of the law grind him down before redemption had a chance? If this story has touched you so far, kindly comment, "Mercy wins." Share this story with all those who need to hear it. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more gripping true crime and emotional redemption stories. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, because in Part 2, Daniel faces the harshest realities of prison life, and the question of mercy versus justice becomes even more urgent. The clanging of metal doors and the echo of heavy footsteps set the rhythm of Daniel Harris's days inside Houston Correctional Facility. Each morning, he awoke to the cold, unforgiving reality of prison life an environment where trust was a currency few could afford and danger lurked in every shadow. Daniel had learned quickly that survival wasn't about brute strength alone. It was about reading the intentions behind a sideways glance, a whispered insult, or the subtle movement of a hand. In the beginning, fear was his constant companion, gnawing at the edges of his resolve, but slowly, it transformed into a quiet determination to navigate this world without losing himself entirely. Reverend Samuel visited regularly, bringing not only spiritual guidance, but an unwavering belief that Daniel could change. Their conversations began cautiously, often with Daniel deflecting, masking the vulnerability he was not ready to reveal. "Why bother?" he asked one day, voice heavy with cynicism. "The system doesn't care about men like me." The chaplain's eyes were steady, unwavering, as he replied, "The system may not, Daniel, but redemption isn't about the system. It's about what you do when no one is watching. Mercy starts with you." Those words planted a seed. Slowly, Daniel began to confront the choices that had led him here. The thefts, the violent altercations, the betrayals of friends and family. Each memory came with its own sting, yet each reflection chipped away at the hardened exterior he had built to survive. The hardest moments were in the solitary nights, when the silence forced him to face himself without distraction. Could he forgive himself for the pain he had caused, for the lives he had shattered? Could he find a way to transform guilt into a path forward, rather than letting it consume him entirely? Outside the prison walls, Daniel's family watched and waited. His younger sister, Maria, had once idolized him, but those memories were clouded by fear and disappointment. Every missed visit, every unanswered letter widened the gap between them. Yet hope persisted. Maria began advocating for him, attending parole hearings, writing letters, and speaking to counselors about his transformation. Could familial love, strained by years of absence, become a bridge between past mistakes and future redemption? The prison yard became a battleground of influence. Fellow inmates observed Daniel's gradual change with skepticism. Many had hardened hearts, convinced that no one truly changed in that environment. Some mocked his efforts, while others, curious, began to seek his counsel on smaller conflicts. Daniel realized that change was not just about personal salvation, it could ripple outward, affecting those around him. Every act of restraint, every choice to mediate rather than fight, became a subtle declaration that a different kind of life was possible, even here. But the pressure was relentless. Conflicts erupted, alliances shifted, and Daniel was reminded daily of the violent world he had left behind. One particularly brutal incident, involving a contraband altercation, threatened to undo all the progress he had made. The violence shook the prison to its core, and Daniel was forced to make a pivotal choice. React in anger, as he had once done, or rise above, risking ridicule and potential danger. His decision would test not only his courage, but the very essence of the mercy he was learning to embrace. With every challenge, every confrontation, the question loomed larger. Could a man defined by crime find a path to redemption without sacrificing his integrity or succumbing to the same destructive patterns that once ruled his life? Daniel's journey was far from over, and the true test of his transformation was yet to come. If this story has touched you so far, comment, "Hope survives." Share this story with all those who need to hear it. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and follow for more gripping true crime and redemption stories. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell, because in Part 3, Daniel faces the court of public opinion, and the tension between justice and mercy escalates to an unforgettable climax. The courtroom was a world away from the claustrophobic confines of the prison. For Daniel, the echo of his footsteps on the polished marble floors was almost deafening. The faces of the jury, stern and impassive, seemed to measure not just the man before them, but the entire life he had lived. Outside the windows, sunlight reflected the promise of freedom, yet the air inside was thick with tension and judgment. Daniel had spent years contemplating this moment, Not in the abstract, but in the raw, gritty reality of a man who had lived with every consequence of his choices. His attorney, Ms. Jennings, had spent weeks building a case that highlighted not just his crimes, but his transformation. Witnesses were called, fellow inmates, prison counselors, even the chaplain who had guided him. Each testimony was a thread weaving a picture of a man no longer defined solely by his past misdeeds. The audience, some families of victims, some curious spectators, listened with rapt attention. Could a criminal truly change? And if so, how should justice weigh that transformation against the lives shattered along the way? Daniel's own words, delivered with careful conviction, carried a weight that surprised even him. "I cannot undo the past," he admitted, voice steady but laced with emotion. "But I have learned that every action has a ripple. I can only commit myself now to healing, to reconciliation, and to ensuring that others do not follow the path I once took." There were tears in the courtroom, some of disbelief, some of empathy. For the first time, Daniel felt the gravity of accountability mix with a fragile sense of hope. Outside the courtroom, the world reacted in real time. News outlets covered the story as a rare example of redemption in the criminal justice system, and social media debates ignited. Some argued that mercy was dangerous, a threat to justice itself. Others celebrated the possibility that even the most hardened individuals could turn their lives around. Daniel's story had become more than a personal journey. It had become a societal question. Could compassion coexist with accountability in a world often obsessed with punishment over rehabilitation? Back in the prison, those who had once doubted him watched the proceedings with a mix of awe and skepticism. Daniel's fellow inmates grappled with a reality that seemed almost impossible. A man could face the full consequences of his crimes and still emerge not broken, but renewed. Conversations in the yard changed subtly. Arguments were tempered with patience, conflicts diffused with newfound strategies. His quiet example began to ripple outward, demonstrating that transformation was contagious when rooted in genuine repentance. Yet, the tension remained. The victims' families, understandably, wrestled with feelings of anger, betrayal, and loss. Their voices, raised in courtroom testimony, demanded recognition of the pain inflicted, and Daniel knew that no apology could erase history. Redemption, he realized, was not about erasing the past. It was about making deliberate choices in the present that honored the memory of those affected and prevented future harm. As the judge prepared to deliver the verdict, the entire courtroom held its collective breath. Daniel's heart raced, not with fear of punishment, but with the awareness that the next moment could define the trajectory of his life outside prison walls. Would the court recognize the man he had become, or would the weight of his past overshadow the evidence of his transformation? If this story has moved you so far, comment "Justice and Mercy." Share this story with everyone who needs to witness a tale of transformation. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and turn on your notification bell. Because in Part 4, Daniel steps into a world where freedom is earned, but the consequences of past choices still linger in unexpected and dramatic ways. The gavel struck, a single resonant sound that seemed to echo through the cavernous courtroom and through Daniel's chest. The verdict was in, and for the first time in years, he could breathe without the weight of constant fear pressing on him. He had been granted parole, a chance to re-enter society, but the outside world was no sanctuary. It was an uncharted landscape, full of both opportunity and temptation, judgment and hope. As he stepped out of the courthouse, the late afternoon sun fell across his face like an almost tangible promise. Yet freedom, he quickly realized, came wrapped in complexity. Daniel's first days outside were a blur of emotions. The world seemed both familiar and alien. Cars rushing past, people engrossed in their phones, the subtle hum of everyday life he had missed behind concrete walls. His family, though strained by years of distance and silence, welcomed him cautiously, grappling with the duality of relief and residual distrust. Old friendships were tested, Some vanished entirely, unable to reconcile the man who had gone away with the one who now returned. Others emerged unexpectedly, neighbors, community members, even former prison mentors, ready to support his reintegration. Could a man truly rebuild a life when society's eyes were still trained on his past? Employment was the next mountain to climb. Daniel knew that economic stability was critical to avoiding the pitfalls that had ensnared him before. He found work at a local community center, mentoring at-risk youth, sharing the hard lessons he had learned firsthand. Each day brought new challenges, lingering stigma from his criminal record, subtle glances that judged before words could speak, moments of self-doubt that threatened to undo the fragile progress he had made. And yet, every story he told, every young person he guided away from destructive choices, reaffirmed the purpose of his journey. Could redemption be measured not in personal comfort, but in the lives one touches along the way? Despite the progress, Daniel faced moments of raw, unavoidable confrontation with his past. One evening, a former associate from his old criminal life approached him on the street. The man's eyes were filled with both suspicion and something darker. A challenge, a reminder of choices made long ago. Daniel could have reverted to old patterns, defended himself, or even run. Instead, he met the encounter with restraint and calm, demonstrating that true change required facing old demons head-on without succumbing to them. The encounter was brief but seismic in its emotional impact, a testament that freedom was as much about internal mastery as external liberty. Meanwhile, the community and media watched keenly. Some celebrated Daniel's reintegration as a triumph of rehabilitation, a story that challenged society's often rigid stance on punishment. Others, skeptical, questioned whether a criminal could truly transform, fearing relapse or deception. Daniel's every move became a test of authenticity, a public demonstration of the painstaking journey from guilt to accountability, from darkness to service. And yet, he remained quietly resolute, understanding that redemption was a daily commitment, not a single verdict or headline. As night fell, Daniel reflected on the paradox of his journey. Liberation intertwined with lingering consequences, opportunity shadowed by the past, mercy balanced with justice. Every choice now carried weight far beyond himself, influencing not only his own life, but the lives of those around him. Could one man's transformation ripple outward enough to challenge societal assumptions about crime, punishment, and forgiveness? If this story has gripped you so far, comment "Freedom and Consequence." Share this story with anyone who needs to witness the true cost and potential of transformation. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and turn on your notification bell. Because in Part 5, Daniel confronts the ultimate test of his newfound life, a choice that could either solidify his redemption or risk everything he has fought to achieve. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint hum of the city waking around Daniel. He had been preparing for this moment for months, but nothing could fully replicate the tension of the reality he now faced. A local youth center, the very place where he had poured his energy to guide others away from crime, had been threatened by gang-related unrest. The police had made a delicate request. Daniel, with his history and understanding of the streets, could mediate the conflict and potentially prevent a tragedy. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like never before. Could he, a man once defined by violence and imprisonment, now be the agent of peace? Arriving at the site, Daniel was met by wary eyes. Teens whose lives teetered on the edge of danger, parents clinging to hope, and rival figures whose presence pulsed with silent hostility. The air was taut with anticipation, and every step he took echoed both literally and metaphorically as he approached the center of the confrontation. His words had to carry authority, empathy, and credibility, a combination that could only be forged through lived experience. "I know where you've been," he said, his voice steady but firm, "and I know where you can go. Don't let anger steal the future from your hands." The confrontation was tense, stretching every nerve and muscle in his body. Insults were thrown, accusations shouted, and yet Daniel remained rooted, listening first, speaking second, and weaving a narrative of consequences and hope. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. Recognition of shared humanity and the tangible reality of consequences began to bridge the divide. He saw reflection in their eyes, a glimmer of understanding that their choices mattered and that there were alternative paths to the streets that had once ensnared him. It was a small victory, fragile but undeniable, and a reminder that redemption is never solitary. It affects the lives of many. Returning home that evening, Daniel felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. He reflected on the extraordinary journey from incarceration to influence, from isolation to community leadership. The prison that had once contained him physically had also contained the potential for transformation, and in the crucible of hardship he had forged a new life that intertwined justice with mercy. The scars of the past remained, but they now served as markers of growth rather than chains of regret. As the night deepened, he considered the lessons etched into every step of his journey. True redemption required patience, courage, and relentless commitment, not just to oneself, but to the broader tapestry of community and society. Daniel had faced judgment, temptation, and doubt at every turn, yet he had chosen the path of integrity and service. The final haunting question remained for all who watched. Can society truly allow room for transformation? Or will the shadow of past mistakes forever define an individual? If this story has moved you, comment "Redemption Realized." Share this gripping narrative with those who need to understand the power of second chances. Subscribe to Crime Chronicles TVc and turn on your notification bell for more chilling, emotional, and inspiring real-life crime stories.